While the Ian McShane narrated Welcome to Dragon's Dogma 2 trailer was no doubt awesome, there's a lot that Dragon's Dogma 2 brings to the table which can feel overwhelming for newcomers. So we're going to be diving in today to everything you need to know before you start playing Dragon's Dogma 2 for the first time, going back to look at the first game a little bit combined with everything we know about the second game to prepare ourselves for what is shaping up to be one of the big RPGs of 2024. Now, the original game was Capcom's first attempt at creating this huge open world RPG action, type game, and it has grown from its debut 12 years ago into this thing that has taken the world by storm over the past couple of weeks as the publicity for Dragon's Dogma 2 has really ramped up into full speed. So one of the first questions that many people ask is, do you need to play the original Dragon's Dogma? The simple answer to that is, how much do you want Easter eggs to matter? Because I could tell you from my perspective as someone who is coming into the game for the very first time, to the franchise for the very first time in 2024, the first game has a lot of really interesting things happening in it, and from a mechanical standpoint, many of those mechanics will be transferring over into the second game. They're just done better because they've had more time to polish them and add more tech to it. But in terms of the story, it's a fairly standalone story. Essentially, we're looking at the anthology style, which we've seen in many other games before, such as the Final Fantasy series. Dragon's Dogma 2 is a standalone game that is set in, essentially, as far as I understand things, this alternate dimension or parallel world where you've got a brand new set of characters who are playing through. So different continent, different races, and so on and so forth. So while many of the mechanics may be in place from the first game, this one is sort of a brand new beginning, and it gives players like myself, who are first-time players, the chance to really sink their teeth into this unique take on the fantasy trope without feeling like it's something that's been done before, or without feeling like you have to go back and play the first game. The first game took place in a land called Grancis, which had its own unique area, its own unique series of political dramas and storylines and side quests, on top of which was, of course, the dragon itself and the threat that it posed to the realm. But whereas the first game, you're sort of only stuck in that one, I don't want to use the word limited because it was a very big area, but it was limited compared to this game. When you come into Dragon's Dogma 2, going back to that parallel world idea from the opening segment, here you are in a different place. So there's different kingdoms here. You've got Vermund and Batal, which are these two warring kingdoms. The land of Vermund is, of course, home to the humans. We've covered that in previous videos, while Batal is home to the Beastrons, which we've also talked about, in addition to the elves, who we've only seen briefly mentioned in the press material for Dragon's Dogma 2. So I'm looking forward to finding out more about them. Now, your job, of course, as the Arisen, is to, take down the dragon. But what's really interesting in this game is that instead of only pursuing it from one specific story angle, in the second game, you're dealing with the cultural beliefs and customs of both the humans and the Beastrons, because both have their own way of relating to the Arisen and their own ideas behind who the Arisen is and the pawns themselves. Just like in the first game, early on in Dragon's Dogma 2, you become the next Arisen, following a confrontation with the dragon. That's sort of the standard opening sequence for these games. And the pawns themselves are sort of at the center of this conflict, because basically you've got all these different people on either side, from the rivals and the false Arisen to these cult leaders and so on and so forth. Essentially, you're going to be dealing with these two kingdoms and their political problems, as well as what you're dealing with as the Arisen, because everyone's wanting to use you and leverage you for their political benefit. So in the second game, we have much more going on in terms of storytelling and factions and the decisions that you have to make, which impact the relations you're going to have with all these different kingdoms. Whereas in the first game, it was sort of like, here's a kingdom, there's a dragon threat, you got to also help the main dude. And then, of course, as you get deeper into the dragon storyline, that took the basically the forefront of that story. We don't know exactly what that's going to be doing for Dragon's Dogma 2, but we can anticipate that the dragon is at the core of this because of the title. It's no secret by this point that the Arisen is a special someone. Essentially, you are a chosen mortal who has been selected to face the deadly dragon in this never-ending cycle over the years that is essentially all about the world's fate, which is a trope that some people appreciate, some people don't. The big thing to remember here is that the Arisen is someone who has player character status. They are not the average, ordinary, non-player character. They are someone who has unique skills, unique abilities, and a unique mindset that transports them beyond simply everyday adventurers. The simple fact that they are able to adopt vocations as they see fit means that they are more than just the average person who is only ever going to be a farmer or only ever going to be a blacksmith. Here, also you can see this in the pawns themselves, who are restricted to specific vocations. But as the Arisen, you get to choose specialized classes as well as have the ability to freely switch between them, which means your ability as a master of combat is second to none. So it really is this sort of, you are the chosen one, but there's a reason why you've been chosen, and I'm not going to spoil anything here, so you're just going to have to play the game to find out more. Pawns are central to the storyline of the game, and they are your companions. But rather than being narrative companions who have these, game-spawning storylines you have to follow, NPCs in this game, or the pawns that you have, are essentially just otherworldly allies that you can bring in to join your party. And they're kind of like just background adventurers, but they do have skills that can be customized. You can also use pawns from other players, so there's an online social element to this, despite the fact that it's just a single-player RPG. And anytime you generate a pawn to recruit, you can then have access to this player community pawn system. It's really, really unique. But essentially, the other cool part of pawns is that the fact that they gain knowledge and they change their way of acting by going on adventures with you and also other players online. Because they have these inclinations, as they go on adventures, they adapt their skill sets depending on what they're coming into contact with. But they also have things like being able to speak languages that you can't speak. So like Elvish as an example in Dragon's Dogma 2. So they'll be able to translate texts that you come across, and they'll be able to give you insight into quests and areas that you're in or monsters that you're fighting. And they'll also occasionally come across with loot that they can share with you. This knowledge is something that they glean from their experience in the world, and then they transfer that knowledge to you as the Arisen, but what you do with that knowledge is up to you. Now, will Dragon's Dogma 2 be addressing any of the original game's story? I don't think that's a known element at the moment, but for long-time fans who have played the first game and know how that first game's story ended up, I think it's safe to say that the cyclical nature of the dragon and Arisen and their relationship is still going to be a very important part of the storyline in Dragon's Dogma 2. As a matter of fact, if you go listen to the story trailer they did with Ian McShane, it's very specifically and explicitly talked about how you as the Arisen are a godlike figure, and you are in this cycle with the dragon, and you've been created because of these godlike abilities you have. So I think it's safe to say that yes, that story is definitely playing a major component here, even though we don't know exactly at what level we're going to be seeing the blending of storylines between the two kingdoms that you're interacting with, as well as the overall story. But for those of you who played the first game and really enjoyed the core storyline that Dragon's Dogma was all about, then I think you're going to be very satisfied here. And if you're someone who appreciated more the action combat and the mechanics, you're also going to be very satisfied because you're getting even better, deeper. The technology is, 15 years better now. So in terms of all the RPG mechanics and the action combat and everything else that was so much fun in the first game, you're going to see that carried over as well here. But hey, the game is just around the corner, so let's get ready to go. I'll be starting bright and early on the morning of the 22nd, so for those of you who have been waiting with bated breath, the time is almost now. So like, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Daily streams here and on Twitch. I'll see you in the Discord, I'll see you on the Patreon, and hopefully in the next live stream as we sink our teeth into Dragon's Dogma 2. Stay safe, everybody. Happy gaming.